7:08 a.m. Quad Cities, News Talk 1420 WOC with Dan and Dan. Coming up Friday night, the 13th annual Quad Cities Henry Farnam Dinner. It's happening at the Rogalski Center, 5 o'clock, St. Ambrose University campus there at the corner of Ripley and Lombard. The Henry Farnam Dinner is a great place to sit around and really talk about Quad Cities history. And on the agenda this year is Fort Armstrong. Joining us from the Rock Island. Are you the official Arsenal historian? Is that your title, George?
No, the Arsenal doesn't have a historian. I'm the Army Sustainment Command historian, and so because there is an Arsenal historian, I fill in where I can.
Okay, well, George Eaton is with us. He's if you're into history in the Quad Cities, I'm sure you've read something that George has written, because obviously a lot of the history of the Quad Cities has to do with the Rock Island Arsenal. And so Fort Armstrong is on the agenda, and that really is that's a very important thing to happen here in the Quad Cities. Fort Armstrong really it's why Arsenal Island is there today.
Well, it's that. It's also, and it's important in the Quad Cities. It is the Quad Cities. It was the first permanent settlement here, and it secured the area. And then after Fort Armstrong went away in 1836, that's when Davenport was founded the same year, and other cities sprang up because the 1816, 1836, the Fort Armstrong gave the security that allowed people to move into the area.
Now, that was a plan of our government to secure sites up and down the Mississippi River, right?
Correct. We after the War of 1812, we decided we better do a better job of securing the frontier, and so we built forts up and down the river, Fort Snelling, Prairie du Chien up and there, and then here and further down.
Fort Madison?
Fort Madison was here and gone by then, so that was a nice attempt.
Okay.
but never put back in again. But it's really kind of interesting because the Quad Cities geography, the Rock Island Rapids ended here.
Right.
And from Fort Armstrong sitting on top of Arsenal Island looking down on the rapids, remember it stood 20 feet above the water back then,
right.
You could control everything from here to Minneapolis. Because people had to come in and out of the water here. And so this really was a great place to control things.
So lay out the fort for us now. Where the blockhouse is now, that's pretty close to where, and that replica blockhouse that we all see, that's pretty close to where the blockhouse was. But there were, and it took me a while to get this, there were only 3 blockhouses. And I went, wait a minute, how do you have a fort with 3 block? Well, one side is the river. You don't really, right? Nobody's coming up that side.
That's it. And so about 200 yards closer to Rock Island was the original blockhouse. And then there was a wall that went into the island itself and a blockhouse, then come back out again, probably to where the Lock and Dam Visitor Center is. There was another blockhouse there. And so everything in close. And those were 300 feet long was each of those walls. That's all it was. So pretty small. And then you're right, the bluff was the last wall. So they were only defending themselves against an attack from coming up the island, not from the water side.
Right. And I know there's a story about caves, because you hear that's where the people who shot George Davenport hid. I know that the Native Americans here, those caves were pretty sacred to them. Are those still down there?
As far as we know, they were not filled in when they put in the lock and dam intentionally. So they're probably all silted in at this point. Mm-hmm. I heard stories that back in the 60s, some folks went diving in there, and they sort of could see where they were, but they were all silted in. They couldn't find anything in there. But they're still there under the water.
Wow. I know one of the items that is going to be talked about at the Henry Farnam Dinner is the 100th anniversary celebration. That's when they built the blockhouse, right? I mean, they built all of that for there. What kind of things were happening with the 100-year celebration?
That's kind of cool, because I'm going to talk about that at the dinner on Friday night. We have another guy coming in from out of town, Sam Watson, coming from the Military Academy at West Point, and he's a well-known artist. He's going to talk about Armstrong and then the move on the frontier and the national stuff. But as far as what was back there, it was a huge civil-military cooperation thing. I mean, there were a whole week of celebrations. There were a couple of different parades. The entry into the arsenal, if you come in for the Davenport gate past the clock tower, they had big towers built with flowers and arbors all around them. They had Native American powwow. They had reenactors from the War of 1812. It was just a huge week-long event that everybody came to the arsenal, and then they went back down to the local towns and had parades. It was huge.
Now, the entry to the arsenal at that point was where that little security house is when you're, I don't know what that's technically called, because, I mean, that has changed so much over time, just how we get onto the, I mean, it's changed very recently, actually, how we get onto the arsenal, but the whole thing, the whole entryway has changed over time.
Yep. So if you go in the Davenport gate and just go in, then there's a couple little stone pillars there and a little house. That was the guard shack.
Right.
And so that's where you had security there. So where the clock tower is now, That was always there, but sort of the gates were sort of pulled back in from that because when General Rodman designed the rest of the arsenal, he didn't see a use to the clock tower, and that's why it was probably falling apart already by 1916. It was the Corps of Engineers got it in 1930 or so, and they were told to clean it up, fix it up, and then use it for their headquarters for building the lock and dam.
We were wondering this morning what those blockhouses, what they actually look like, because this is replica. And Dan was suggesting that probably they didn't do the interior on these things.
They probably did not do the interior. I mean, it really was a security, safety thing. From reading about 1916, what we've dug in, it was almost to scale. So what's there? So probably what was originally there was a little bit bigger than that. But all there would have been in there would have been a ladder to get upstairs to get higher for better elevation. You drive by it now, you see the holes in the walls. That was where they could stick their weapon out and shoot. If they were being attacked inside. So, but I think it was probably very, very plain inside.
Even today, like they didn't really do anything on the interior of that blockhouse. That was never really intended for people to go in there, right?
It wasn't. I think last time I peeked in there were some construction signs stored in there and some sawhorses and things like that.
We were guessing what's in there right now. I mean, that's what we said. It's like it's a really nice shed.
It's a nice shed. So something cool we're going to do in 1966 for the 150th. They buried a time capsule. And if you drive by there's a big boulder with a plaque on it. Underneath that's the time capsule. And so we've gotten permission. We're going to dig that up sometime between now and May. And so we'll get some press out on that. But it's going to be kind of fun to see some stuff that was put in there. And we know for sure there was a pen and a medallion sent by, personally by LBJ, by President Johnson for the 150th anniversary. So that's going to be kind of fun in May or closer to May when we finally get a chance to dig that thing up and see what's still in there.
Wow.
The Henry Farnam Dinner, if you would like tickets to this, River Action, I believe, is
River Action. If you go to their website, you can see it there.
Yeah, that's riveraction.org, or the telephone number is 563-322-2969. That's our friend Kathy Wine, everything from River Action, who's doing the tickets for that. I'm really looking forward to it. It should be an interesting presentation on Friday night. And like you said, our Fort Armstrong is the history of the Quad Cities. That's where it starts.
Let me give one more plug. There's a great model of Fort Armstrong in the Rock Island Arsenal Museum, which is now open from Tuesday through Fridays, noon to 4. And so you can get on the Arsenal. It takes a few minutes to get on the Arsenal, but go to the museum if you're interested, and there's a great model of what it looked like.
Yeah.
And you have to have what now? Still have to have like 3 or 4 passports.
If you're from Iowa, you only need your driver's license. But if you're Illinois, you got to have a passport or several other forms of identification.
You got to leave a kid at the front gate, and you have to. There's a few other things, right?
My daughter lives in Chicago. We had to dig out her birth certificate the other day.
Oh, really?
To get her in. But she got in 5 minutes once she had that.
Yeah.
So.
All right, George. It's always good. I could sit down and I could listen to George talk for just hours about the history of the Quad Cities and the Arsenal.
That'd be awfully boring, I think, after a while.
Yeah, but if you're a history fan of the Quad Cities, want to know more about it, this is a perfect opportunity.
It's a great opportunity. I encourage everybody to come
and learn about. I mean, Henry Farnam, the guy that's named after, is the guy who got the railroad here, basically from Chicago. So
and built the first bridge in 1856. So that's why they named it after him.
Yeah,
because everything that they do in the Farnam Committee is local to national.
Wow, very cool. Well, George, nice to see you. Thank you so much for stopping by, and we'll see you Friday night. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
George Eaton joining us this morning.